It's the Kink Consultant Podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Here's why you should strongly consider finding your community with kink. First of all, it's good for the community and it's good for you, okay? You have the opportunity to meet other people who are interested in the same things you're into. This can be a lonely practice, but when you get involved in the community, you meet a bunch of people who are into the same things you're into, or even variations of it, but you're meeting people who understand what it's like to live kinky, who understand what it's like to want to explore kinks. And dating is hard, being kinky can be difficult. It's nice to have other people around you who are into the same things. Most of my friends here in Vegas are from the kink community because when I moved here, I was like, how do you make friends as an adult? So I got on FetLife. I started to look for what events were happening. I found a group called Vegas Toolbox, and I went to their online orientation so that I could start going to educational classes. Then I found out about some munches that were supposed to be good. And technically I could have just gone straight to a munch, but it was good to meet people, see who I got along with, and then go to the munches they recommended. From there, it sort of spiraled. I'd go to a munch, which is a plainclothes meetup of kinky people. You can go to like a diner or somewhere where you could munch on food and just talk to each other. To find your specific kink community, I think start general and filter down. Here's what I would do. I would get on FetLife and make a profile if you don't have one already. Yes, you can find events elsewhere, but a lot of them are still posted on FetLife. For some reason, I hear people say, oh, FetLife's dangerous, and that's 100% true, but so is Instagram if you start meeting random people from it. So I guess that's neither here nor there. I'm just tired of people who are saying, don't get on FetLife, it's dangerous. It's like, so is Facebook Marketplace. It depends on what you use it for. You have to be cautious. So get on FetLife and make a profile. Then navigate to the events page, and FetLife's gotten really good. You can filter by event type. BDSM party, social event, educational event, sex party. I would say filter first by the social and educational events because those are going to be your like plain clothes meetup a lot of the time where you're just meeting other kinky people and it's a great way to dip your toe in the water. Okay. So I would start there. There are even specific munches for specific communities. Like there are rope munches, spanking munches, impact munches, master slave type of munches. So it depends on the dynamic and the kink. So you can start there, meet people who you're getting along with, and then find out, well, what events did they recommend? And then check out those events. Here are some things you should look for in a healthy and welcoming kink community. Because safety is important, you want to make sure you're going somewhere where people look out for each other, where they give you the lay of the land when you get there, and they're really genuinely welcoming. So when I went to my first munch, the organizer stood up, introduced himself, asked me a little bit about myself, and then he sat me with people who he thought I might get along with. So he did a great job of facilitating that. He's amazing. I actually had him on the podcast, him and his wife, Jim and Veronica. I credit them a lot with how well I was integrated into the community. So I was really lucky with that experience, but I've had experiences where there are red flags. And one of the things that normally tips me off, this might just be a woman-to-woman thing, but I have had women come up to me and say, be careful of that guy, be careful of that guy. And sometimes there's just like one weirdo that no one wants to talk to, but other times you hear 2 or 3 people tell you to be careful and you start to wonder, well, why is that person still in the community? If there's more than one person like that, that's a huge red flag for me because it means that the organizers are not properly vetting and taking complaints seriously. So that's one red flag. The second red flag is when there's an imbalance of ages or groups within the community because it just sometimes creates this almost predator vibe. If it's all these young girls and then a bunch of older men, the question is, where are the younger guys too? Have they been scared out by the older crew who sometimes can be a little gatekeepy? That's a red flag for me. I mean, and it goes both ways. Sometimes it's older women who are super gatekeepy and they can be bitchy to young girls. When I started making content, that was my number one thing. I was like, fuck the gatekeepers. Like, I'm done with them. And I was so done with them. I was like, I make content to say fuck the gatekeepers and make this information more accessible to everyone who ever wants the info, you know? I know I talked a lot about FetLife, but you wouldn't believe it. There are also communities online. There are certain Discord groups and also Facebook groups that you can get involved in. So I would search through there. And then if you're looking for more events, Eventbrite in your city might actually have a lot listed. So if you go to Eventbrite and you can, I think, filter for adult events or something along those types of parties. So there is a lot of information out there. I just think FetLife is the easiest because it's all concentrated, and then you can see which of your friends are going to it because it is like a social media site for kink. Facebook, if you start following creators who post about kink in general, sometimes they post events that are happening and in different communities, and they have their own discords as well. There's like a lot of places where you can find that. Like the Patreon I set up where twice a month I meet with a group of people who are all kinky and dating, and we sort of discuss the highs and lows of it. We give each other advice, and we just talk through what it's like, what our challenges have been, and what our wins have been. So there's community around dating kinky as well. That's one thing I will say about us kinksters. There's a lot of us out there who crave community. So we create it ourselves, and we'll put in the work. We'll create the parties to create the spaces we want to exist so we can feel more comfortable and make others feel more comfortable to go down the paths we want to go down and explore the things we want to explore. I've been to so many in-person and online events, and I've met amazing people in both, right? I'm going to be honest about it. You would think that the in-person events, oh, people left their house, they got dressed up, they really committed to going out. Not the case either. People show up as they are. And that's sort of like what we love about the kink community too. It's like no one's expecting fireworks, right? Except it really disappoints people too. People are disappointed by their local communities because they're not full of these beautiful kinky people that we've been fed like pictures of to believe that like, oh, kink is all these size 0 people in bondage and stirrups and like, I don't know, dressed as horses in like beautiful gilded, I don't know, costumes. It's not like that online. It's not like that in person at these social events. Sure, you can go somewhere like OnlyFans and pay to see someone dressed as your ideal kinky person. Or you can pay for an app and listen to stories about like from your ideal kinky man, but it's not actually like that online or in real life for these social events. Real people dressed like me, showing up as themselves, talking about the thing that they love. I will say that the community invites people to show up as they are, and express themselves. So at like the social events that are in bars and pubs, yeah, people are going to be dressed vanilla. But when you go in person to an event, you're encouraged to be yourself. And the advice I always give my coaching clients who are going to parties for the first time is show up as your most authentic self. Follow the dress code, yes. If it's fancy dress, do it. But if you feel like wearing a kilt, wear a kilt. If your alter ego or your kinky self wears a top hat, wear a freaking top hat to the event. Be that version of yourself that feels authentic to you. If it's a Victorian era woman in full getup, like head to toe, this is the place for you. Arguably, you can dress like that anywhere, but I feel like you're going to be celebrated in these communities for showing up as yourself. Okay, I go to a lot of parties alone, and it's partly because I love to go to new places, and sometimes I don't have a group of people to go with. So I have a few tips of like what I do to introduce myself. Sometimes if I'm going somewhere totally new, I'll contact the organizer on FetLife and say, hey, I'm showing up to the party, would love to meet you in person beforehand, or I'll come find you. The really good parties will have someone to greet you, ask if it's your first time, and give you a tour. Okay? Sometimes I'll tell that person, I'm kind of shy. Do you mind introducing me to anyone? I don't mind calling out that I'm shy. Other times, before I go into the party, I always have a little talk with myself of like, we're all just here meeting people for the first time. Let's see how it goes. Be confident. And I'll have that, like, I'll big myself up in a way, almost like mantras. My go-to is I will find someone who is around my age and feels like maybe we'd get along. Okay, so most recently I was at a party and I introduced myself to a couple and I said, hi, I'm Amanda. Do you come to these parties often? I open it up with a curiosity thing of like, instead of like launching into something about me, I ask about them and then try and get the conversation to flow from there. If not, I try and move on to the next group or person. In an example like this, I talked to most recently at the party, I introduced myself, asked if they came there often. Turned out they were from out of town, which is really cool. We talked a little bit about the local scene where they lived. And then I said, I'm going to go get a drink, right? And I went off, and on my way to get a drink, I then introduced myself to someone new. And I said, oh my God, I love your collar. Where did you get it? And oh my gosh, this corset. And these were genuine things. I really did love her collar and corset. And it turned out her partner was getting her some water from the bar. So by the time her partner got back, we were already deep in conversation, you know? So those are like my intro things. It's sort of complimenting people authentically and also asking questions about themselves. If you introduce yourself, they're not like, ooh, what the fuck? Maybe they're in the middle of a conversation. And that's another thing. Timing is everything. You don't want to inject yourself into a conversation. And another thing that's kind of awkward is if people are already in a conversation and you sort of edge your way in, as opposed to just being like, oh, I heard you were talking about this. Do you mind if I join the conversation? I prefer a direct approach instead of like, because they might say no, you know, or like, actually, this is a private conversation. And sometimes that rejection hurts a little bit, but you kind of got to just hold it together and sort of realize it's not personal. That was a private conversation. Let me move on. And that's happened to me. You know, it's like, okay, this is a cliquey friend group. Those things happen when people go to the same parties year in, year out for a really long time. It's not personal. They just have their group. Now I need to go find mine. And I know it can be really nerve-wracking to go to one of these events, especially if it's your first time. But ultimately, these are still social events. They are there for people to meet with each other and enjoy something that they all love together. So at the end of the day, you're still at a social event. The purpose is to be social and meet new people. Most people are showing up with the excitement of getting to meet new people. Sometimes we create a community online of people who live across the country, across the globe, and those people can be just as meaningful in our lives as the people who we meet weekly at parties or at munches, because they're going through the same thing we're going through a lot of the time. I mean, the friends you make, regardless of location, are still friends. Sometimes it's hard when you get into the relationship side of things because a DS dynamic or even a Dom sub scene partner not being able to receive physical aftercare can be quite jarring for people. It's a lot easier to get catfished like online instead of meeting people in person, because you can fake a lot online and get away with a lot that as soon as you see someone in person, they're different, right? So something I recommend people do just to keep themselves safe is FaceTime. There is not one single excuse in today and age. If they can talk to you on the phone, they can find a way to FaceTime you. They can download WhatsApp to their phone. They can get on a Zoom call, Google Meets. There are so many options, and there are so many free options to do like face-to-face call. And that can save you as well, like just enforcing that early. Oh, one more thing that I like to do when I meet people online, and this is just in dating, is people can have these whole profiles set up and it seems like them. I will make them take a selfie in the moment, and I'll do something like this and send a selfie. And I say, send a selfie with you doing the same gesture so that you know it's fresh. Yeah. So those are just some of the things. I think safety is super important, and knowing who you're talking to is important. There are just so many bad actors out there, even in person. It's like tenfold online. So you got to protect yourself. Some other ways that you can protect yourself is, I think a lot of times, especially on the sub side, subs want to be nice. They don't want to push too hard. They're told, get in your lane, or this is how you're going to act. If it's your first time exploring submission, it can be so exciting. You can actually be in what we call sub frenzy, where you're just so excited to try everything. You're going to try everything, and you're just going to be more submissive than you might normally be because of the excitement to try everything. You find someone and you feel like, oh my God, someone finally understands me. And it can feel super special because they're telling you everything you want to hear. It's just like the books or movies, and you're having these amazing experiences, but you skip over the part where there's communication, or the person you're talking to tells you this is how it's supposed to be. You need to have communication. If something doesn't feel right, you need to talk to them about it and say, I'm not feeling right about this. We need to go more in depth about this. Can we have a conversation? You need to be talking to someone who's willing to have the conversation. And if they're hardlined, I'm the dom, you're the sub, this is what we're doing, or even vice versa, they're not for you. If they are not willing to have a conversation and they're very hardline about how I'm the dom, I'm the sub, I'm a brat, this is how I am, and they're not willing to come to the table and be like, okay, what do we need to negotiate? What do we need to tweak here? Cut them. Don't even engage in trying to like convince them. Don't bargain with them. Cut them. If I can just say one thing to everyone, it's that in order to be in a community, you have to be part of the community, and that requires getting out there. And I know it's tough sometimes. It's tough to get dressed at the end of a week and go out, but being active in the community is what keeps it alive. Okay. I really cannot stress the importance enough of getting out there and talking to people. I meet a lot of people who say like, oh, well, there's just no community where I am. And it's kind of one of those things you have to start showing up. I actually have a friend who does this when he posts on FetLife about a month. He's trying to start it up. And his point is, in order to have this, we need to start it and be present at the beginning. And that's something, if you are starting it, show up, be there, and put the time in to build what you want, because you get out of it what you put into it. Okay, so show up, be present. If you've been going to events for a few months, be the person you wish existed when you started going to those events. Let's set the record straight and talk about DS dynamics. So what makes a great DS relationship? Communication. It's so cliche, but good communication is what makes or breaks it. Okay, you could have 3 different dominant partners, okay, and they all have a different flair to how they dom. Or you could have 3 different submissive partners, and they're all going to have their own flair of how they sub. Some could be like a good sub, others could be bratty. What you need is strong communication between you two so you can adjust on the fly. Like, pause for a second, be like, this isn't working for me. We need to figure out how to adjust this. Without that, you just have 2 people moving forward in a dynamic, maybe one or both of them being unhappy. So you need to be able to communicate. I think it's really important that both people are curious. In a kinky dynamic, you need curiosity. You need people asking questions like, how did that feel? What did you enjoy about that? What could be better? You need that type of curiosity so that you're both consistently improving and making the relationship stronger and better. Without that type of communication, you're not going to figure out ways to make it better. And I think this is rare, if not impossible. Your dynamic is not going to progress because you can't just be curious about your own interests and needs and wanting to explore those. You're in a partnership, a dynamic. That means you're in it with someone else. So you need to be understanding what's going through their head, how they're feeling, as well as how you are. So it's like just as important to be able to share how you're feeling and what you're interested in as it is to ask questions and get that information out of your partner. So when we talk about DS dynamics, technically you can be the dominant partner, the submissive partner, but then there are people out there who are also switches. They can easily flow into both. And they might lean more dom or more sub. So you could see like dom leaning switch or sub leaning switch written on some people's profiles. And there are kind of some easy ways to figure it out, but also just being in the lifestyle and exploring it help you figure out what you're into as well. So there's something called the BDSMtest.org, and you can go in there and answer a bunch of questions. And some of them are extreme, but that's because some people are into really extreme things. Just because you're not, those questions shouldn't scare you away. But you can get results on what percentage dom, subs, vanilla you are. And I think that's really good insight and a great place to start. So that's number one. The other thing is just by being in a dynamic, you might feel certain ways over time, right? You might enter it as the submissive partner, and then you realize, ooh, my dom's a little bit bratty, and I have some stuff to say about that. And you know what? I would love to flip roles here with them right now. That might be an indicator you're a little bit of a switch. Sometimes personally, I get a little primal and I want to choke and slap. And even though I would say I'm a sub-leaning switch, there's definitely some switch in me too. One of the biggest misconceptions about the dom-sub dynamic is that people just enter into it and the amazing doms are born that way. And amazing subs are just going to be completely subservient and anticipate needs better than anybody that they've ever met. Simply and sadly not true. As I said, it takes a lot of communication to get there. I mean, even if you find your perfect dom, there's still going to need some tweaks to be the perfect dom for you. Likewise, if you find the perfect sub, there's still going to need to be some tweaks for them to be the perfect sub for you. And I don't even believe in perfect. I just believe that 2 people can find each other and enter into a dynamic with the right level of flexibility and communication, and it can lead to something really great. It's super important to know and understand if you are experiencing a healthy power exchange or if you're with someone who just wants to either give up control completely or just take control completely, because it's a balancing act. Both people need to feel empowered in the dynamic, in the relationship, to express their needs, to be themselves, and to bring things up. Neither party should feel like they can't speak up. Neither party should feel like they are just there to play a role. One of the big red flags that it's really easy for me to start filtering people out is when I first start talking to them or we start discussing the dynamic, If they throw out something like, I make the decisions now, you ask me, or when I'm talking to a sub, if they're like, I just want to give you all my money and I want you to take control. As nice as those things might sound in a fantasy world, in reality, that's just not going to work, right? You can't expect to come in and be able to take control or give control over without all of this communication. And at no point are you ever fully giving up control. There should always be the safe words and those little things in place to make sure you are empowered to stop things when you want. Before entering into a dom-sub relationship, you absolutely need to discuss what you both want out of said relationship. Like, go to your ideal end scenario and then figure out how to work back from there. So it's sort of like, okay, if we want something 24/7, I don't just say what I'm looking for is 24/7. And then I start saying, that is what this looks like for me. This is what I'm imagining. This is how the day starts. This is how much communication is happening between us. What does that look like for you? Or what is your goal? Okay, so let's say we both start with our goals, the dom and the sub, and we sort of bring it together to talk about what the ideal situation or the ideal goal is. This is what we both want. Then we got to talk about what the specifics look like. I always recommend people write everything out because this is my silly example. I could say the word house. And yes, we could both think of an actual house and think of multiple variations. Is it like a shack or is it a mansion? But maybe someone's thinking Dr. House, the show, when they hear the word house. Two completely different things, same word, right? Write it out and describe it in great detail so you understand if you're on the same page as someone. That is why I created the communication workbook. For people who are trying to achieve this, it's a step-by-step guide to introduce what you're interested in. It helps you break it down into those like really granular pieces of information so that you can come together with your partner and go through what you're both expecting out of a scenario. You can find it in the show notes below. When I realize a dynamic isn't working for me, and sometimes it's because I've changed, sometimes it's my partner's changed, or the dynamic just isn't serving us the same way anymore, I kind of do a virtual timeout and I say, let's sit down and talk about what's going on. Sometimes I say, we need to take a break. We need to pause. No matter what dynamic you're in, you should always be able to take a pause on it because life happens and you need to reset. So what I'll say is, I need to take a break from this. I cannot be in the submissive role right now. I need to step out of it and readjust before I can step back into it. So I recommend calling a pause, talking to your partner. Maybe you're pausing because of the way they're behaving, or it's how you're feeling in the moment, but you need to have that conversation. The truth is, if you don't feel safe or comfortable having that conversation, I am questioning whether or not that relationship is healthy in the first place. A lot of people think if I'm going to be in a dom-sub relationship, it needs to be 24/7. It's all in or all out. People practice in so many different ways. You could even be in something considered a little bit extreme, like a master-slave relationship, and that master-slave relationship could just exist in the four walls of your bedroom on the first Saturday of the month, between the 8 hours of 8 and 10 p.m. It can be a super specific thing, or it can be more elaborate. It can be constant. So you can go from super loose to super strict. It is so customizable that there are no set rules. That's why this communication thing is really big, because the spectrum is huge. It's like really complex. There are so many options. So when you're starting to have a dynamic, or when you're starting discussions about what it is you want, one of the things you should discuss is, how serious do we want to be about this? How intense do we want to be? And then once you decide that, scale it back from there too. You're dipping your toes in the water to see how this feels. You're introducing it slowly. I would never, ever recommend you go from 0 to 100. You don't go from like, let's talk about this today and be in a 24/7 dynamic tomorrow. You're setting yourself up for failure. So what I'm going to suggest is you try maybe just doing it in the bedroom at first, in the evenings, starting at 6 p.m. Like, time box it and say, let's try this. And then you stop and discuss. You have a start time and an end time. Once the end time comes, check in with each other. Set a schedule of when your check-in's going to happen. Maybe it can't happen as soon as it ends. Maybe you want it to happen immediately after, in which case you tailor the amount of time you're going to spend in this session or in this practice versus how much time you're going to spend talking about it after. Then start incorporating the feedback into the practice. Then you might go for longer. You might go a whole day trying to incorporate the DS relationship or trying to live the DS relationship you want. Just be building on it and continue to talk to each other. That is why I made the Speak Your Desires with Confidence worksheet. It's like a template you can go back to over and over again to work through this process with your partner. Give feedback, take feedback, journal your thoughts about how you're feeling and how you want to build on your own dynamic. And have that at the ready for when you're ready to give and receive feedback. One of the most common questions that I get every week during my Ask Me Anything is, what do you do if you're kinky and your partner is vanilla? I want people to understand, just because you're kinky, it doesn't make you a freak. You're not a weirdo for being kinky. It's just a different desire. It's like, what do you do if you love cheese and your partner doesn't love cheese? Okay. You start by having a conversation about it, right? It's sort of like, okay, I want you to understand me and what I love. Equally, I want to understand you and what you love. I always recommend, just because someone's not kinky, it doesn't mean they're void of any fantasy or desire. They just might have more vanilla or more romantic fantasies or desire. So I like to ask, what are your fantasies? What's something you've never explored but would like to? Or what's something you've tried in your past that you really enjoyed and you want to do again? I like to open up the conversation that way because I want to get my partner to start sharing with me. The hope is that we're already in a strong enough relationship, or like my assumption here is that you're already in a strong enough relationship to have this type of conversation, because you need to have good communication in general to bring things like this up. Okay, so you start by asking your partner that. You're leading with curiosity and inviting them to share with you. And this is opening up the stage for you to enter and also share about you. The one thing I will say is, again, I've said this on previous episodes, this is not just your opportunity to dump all of the information about you and have your needs met. You're learning about your partner too. So you need to be in this together and figuring out what you both want. There might be some overlap even in what your kinks are and what their fantasies and desires are. You might be able to create the bridge between you. But overall, just make sure that you're coming into it knowing that their fantasies, even if they lack them or they're not able to verbalize them right now, are not normal compared to your interests and fantasies. They are just different. I'm going to give a PSA on my personal experience of navigating this one partner's kinky, the other partner's vanilla type of relationship. And this is just my personal experience exploring and being in these types of relationships and talking to a lot of different people who have had to navigate the same things as well. A lot of times people will introduce a coach as the last straw of like, how do we save this now? And it's already too far gone. The moment that you realize that you and your partner's fantasies, desires don't align, that's the moment to reach out to a professional, a relationship coach, a therapist, someone who can help you both find common ground or a bridge to start exploring this together. This is a big thing to navigate by yourself, and there are people out there who can help. I am not saying that it's going to be the perfect answer for a kinky person and a vanilla person to make their relationship work, but I do think it's going to make it a lot easier to work with someone and figure out how you two can find common ground. So when is like a good time in the relationship or even in the day for the kinky partner to bring this up to the vanilla partner or the expected vanilla partner? I'm always going to recommend you have a conversation when there's not a lot else going on. This is an important conversation to have. Make sure there are no distractions. Maybe you need to go out to have coffee in the car together to have this conversation so that no one else is part of it. There are no interruptions. It's just you and your partner, like ready to talk and listen. In terms of where you are in the relationship, as I said, you need to be in a place where there is trust between you both already. I would not recommend bringing this up during a time when trust isn't at the forefront of the relationship. If communication in general hasn't been that strong, this might not be the right time to bring up this part of the conversation. Even if it feels like fixing it will fix everything, finding other ways to establish strong communication, a belief that there is trust and both parties want the best for each other. That's the foundation you want to look for before you introduce this. If you don't have it, you're truly setting yourself up for failure, because this isn't some magic wand that's going to fix everything, even though sometimes it can feel that way for us. It's like, if I just had this one thing that I'm dying for, the rest of the relationship would be fine. This one thing you're dying for is only going to thrive with good communication, and you need to have that in other aspects of your life. For example, for me, it's really important I bring this up early. And yes, I put it on my dating profiles and I do ask people if they're kinky, but let's say I'm on a second or third date and I haven't mentioned it once, but I'm ready to bring it up now because it is important. I just didn't want to mention it earlier. I am only bringing this up, and I'm only going on second dates actually with people who ask me questions about myself. If I am leading the entire conversation, it doesn't matter if I'm talking to someone who might be sub, might be dom. If they're not asking questions, if they're not engaging in conversation, if there's not a back and forth, I already know there's going to be no back and forth when I bring up the vanilla kink conversation. So I don't let it get to that stage. I'm looking for green flags in the whole person, as opposed to just whether or not we might be a kinky fit together. But those are some of the things you need to look for in your relationship too, even if it's really well established and you've been dating or married for a long time. Are you in a place where you're having back and forth conversations and both contributing to the conversation? Okay, the biggest mistake I think people make when they're introducing a kink, on my podcast a few weeks ago from No Shame with CJ, talking about this as well, the person who is kinky has been obsessing over it or doing all the research and thinking about it for so long that they forget to do that simple step of breaking it down for a partner who is totally new to it. And I do this with my clients a lot. I help them break it down to its base form. I think that one of the things you need to do when you share your kink with someone is talk about the core desire that is being met as you explore that kink. For example, if you're into shibari, if you're into being tied up or being the one doing the tying, it might be about a sense of control or lack thereof. Okay, so say you are being tied up in a specific position. It can make you feel really safe and secure and not worried about your surroundings. So that's a core desire you can speak to. I want to feel safe. I feel safe when I am tied up. And that is why I enjoy rope play so much. Equally, the person doing the tying might feel, I like to feel in control. I like knowing you're not going to move. And that is why I enjoy doing the tying. Think about it. That conversation could be like, I really like to be tied up in rope. And that could be the end of it, because in your mind, you're very goal oriented. You got to step back a little bit and think, what am I trying to achieve here? I'm trying to feel safe. I'm trying to feel in control. I'm trying to feel not in control. Start there and then layer on the kink or the interest you have and how it sort of fulfills that need or goal you have, you know? So in order to find out if your partner is open or not to exploring it, I still think it's important to share the core desire that you have and you want met, and then ask them, like, do you think you'd be interested in learning rope or trying it out? You're just asking them to dip their toe in the water. Here's how we can try this a little bit. Like, would you consider trying or allowing me to just tie your wrists or tie one leg to see what it feels like? And what you're hoping for is, yes, that they'll say, yeah, we can try it, and then you start small. If they say absolutely not, and it's the end of the conversation for them, and you're just completely shut down, I'm not going to recommend you keep trying to have the conversation, because you're going to end up in a cyclical, like in a loop of just like, okay, rejection, let me try again, hoping for a different result. That is 100% one of the times I'd recommend you reach out to a couples therapist, or that's when I recommend you reach out to a sex and relationship coach, someone who understands that desires don't always match up and how to help progress these conversations between a couple. So what happens if you do finally introduce this and your partner shuts it down immediately? How do you handle that? You're going to have to sit with that for a second. I would not recommend being reactive or going in on them. Your gut reaction might be, well, I'm going to attack them for making me feel this way. I'm going to tell them how wrong they are for shaming me about my kinks. And even though that might feel really good in the moment, what you need to do is sort of retreat. I want you to take care of yourself in that moment and tell yourself, my partner said these things, but that is not true for me. I am a whole person. I just have this kink and there is nothing wrong with it. Give yourself the aftercare you deserve from being in that experience, work on healing from it, and then go back to the table and have a conversation with your partner about how maybe even this isn't for you. It's something that's really important to me. And I would like for you to understand that this is something that I am going through or thinking about right now. I'd like to have a conversation about it. So, yes, you can try and have that conversation again, but you have to approach it from a healed place. And these conversations are difficult. So if you need a little bit more help, I'm going to give you a few tips of how to approach these conversations. So as I said, my number one thing is always lead with curiosity. Number two, break it down. Break it down to its base form so you're helping your partner understand the needs behind it. Number three, I need you to start saying on a regular basis, for me, this is how it appears. This is how it feels. Because you can't speak for everybody. You have to say, for me, this is what I need. This is what's important to me. Understand that when your partner's talking, give them the same empathy or grace that when they're talking, even though they might not be using the phrase, what their meaning is for me, right? Because that's the only person they do have domain and authority over to represent in these conversations. So get in the habit of saying for me. If you don't understand something, or if your partner says something that might offend you or bristle a little bit when you hear it, I'd encourage you to go in and dig a little bit deeper. Say, what do you mean by that? Or when you say that, I hear this. And then tell them what you're hearing or what is going on in your brain that makes you bristle or sort of brace for impact with what they've said. Tell them, when you said that, I heard this. And I want to know, is that how you meant it? Because honestly, 9 times out of 10, that's not usually how they meant it. There's something going on, for me at least, in my own brain or in my body, and I'm having a reaction from something that happened before, and I'm layering that on. I'm projecting on what they said. So when I say, when you said that, for me, what I heard was, when you said you don't like spanking or you think spanking's gross, for me, what I heard is, you think I'm gross for wanting it. Is that what you mean? And then they might say, no, I just hated getting spanked as a kid, so it's gross. And they don't mean you're gross for wanting it, just that for them, spanking as a whole feels gross. Something I've been guilty of in the past is making my partner feel like they weren't enough because they shared my desire. This was especially true when I first started exploring my kinks, and maybe they weren't into it as much or they were trying, but it wasn't at the level I needed. And I think I played a part in doing some damage to the relationship by making them feel like they weren't stepping up to the plate enough and not recognizing how hard they were trying. That's why this conversation is sometimes so tough for me, because I'm faced with the mistakes I made in my previous relationships and how I had to overcome them or work through them with partners. Now, in hindsight, I'm glad I had those experiences so I can help other people avoid them or work their way out of them a little bit faster. Lead with gratitude. It's something a lot of you have heard me say, because I always want your partner, I've even included in the worksheet, which you need to check out in the show notes, lead with gratitude. Be thankful that they're showing up for the conversation. Be grateful and thankful that you're able to express your own needs. And I think when you lead with gratitude, it sets you up for a stronger conversation with your partner. Appreciation is a habit. It's a muscle, I think, that you need to work on. So if you lead with gratitude, you're working on that muscle. You become the type of person who sees the silver linings. You become the type of person who starts to appreciate, I see the effort you're doing. Speak out what you see them doing for you. Okay, so start with that. Be like, I see how much work you've done, how much research you've done, if they have, and that makes me feel really good and cared about. So start acknowledging their milestones, how they've been making you feel. Because when you start leading with encouragement like that, it's going to make them feel better about the work they've done as well. And they're going to think like, wow, I've been recognized for that. Let me do a little bit more of it. Confidence in the role of dom or sub is something that a lot of people struggle with. During trying to tap into their sub energy and really be in that submissive space might not always feel natural, even for people who consider themselves 100% submissive. Same thing for the dom. I've heard that a lot from dominants before, especially if there's a lot going on in their life. They have trouble sort of stepping into the role. There's a lot of imposter syndrome on both sides, actually, the dom and sub side. So how do you handle when your partner might be interested and willing to try, but feeling really unsure? I think you go through the journey with them in lockstep. Find an educational resource together and learn together. Figure it out. Talk about what you're learning. Just because you are the one who wants to maybe be tied up doesn't mean you can't learn how to do the tying with them so you can practice and talk about it. Maybe try on each other so that you both know what it feels like. I think this is especially true, and I like to use the rope example for it because if you're just tying someone up, you may never know what it feels like for yourself. So exploring it together could be helpful so you understand what it feels like on you and you know the experience you're giving the other person. You might not get the same rush or thrill from it, but physically, you might be able to understand what they're going through. If your partner's not feeling confident, that's an area where you have the opportunity to step up and step in and help build their confidence in it. Pet peeve of mine is when I hear people say, well, I don't want to train someone. I just want to find someone. At the end of the day, we're always training people how to treat us. In healthy relationships, we're speaking our boundaries and explaining them to the other person. So this is just an extension of that. And yes, it does sound ideal and like a wonderful fantasy for someone to be able to just step in and know exactly what we want or have done it 1,000 times before and be an expert. That's not the reality of it. It's important to get real about how much we might need to teach our partner about what we're interested in. Can a vanilla and kinky relationship survive long term? If you're genuinely kinky and this is something you need and you're with a vanilla partner, it's not going to work. You are going to break up eventually. You might be able to spend 3 years exploring it separately unless you have a poly dynamic. Like if you're in a monogamous relationship and they're like, yeah, you can find play partners, or you decide to open it up. And if you're a monogamous person who wants kink, you're not going to be able to find this elsewhere. That's my issue. I'm monogamous and I'm looking for one person to fulfill all of these things. And I've ended up in 2 long-term relationships where I was with someone who didn't fulfill them. And it didn't work. And as much as I'd love to say that my story is an anomaly, the more I speak to people, and I do this for a living, the more I see couples who are unable to get past this. If one person's not willing to give up their kink or not explore it, and those people are committed to a monogamous relationship, it eventually eats away at the person, their kink, so that they don't explore it deeper. There's this quote from a book I read once. It was a kinky fiction book. The quote was, "A fetish is pet you feed or the beast that eats you. If you don't do it, it's going to consume you." And I experienced that with spanking. Like, I really need a good punishment spanking from time to time. Take me over your knees, spank me, and scold me. If I don't have that, it becomes all I think about. I also jokingly compare it to when I go on a diet. I could go 3 days without eating a single piece of chocolate. As soon as chocolate is off the table and it's like, you're on a diet right now, all I think about is chocolate. That's what it can be like when you're kinky. So if your partner is saying no chocolate for you for the rest of your life, all you think about is how you will never have chocolate again. You think about ways like, okay, well, how am I going to sneak this in? How can I indulge this without them knowing? And if that's not part of the dynamic you're in, it starts to erode your commitment and your partner's commitment to the relationship. You can't hide things like this in a monogamous relationship. And even if you can, and I'm not against people hiding things, it just doesn't allow you to be the most authentic version of yourself. And I think that starts to show. If the kinky partner isn't so kinky that they need it, yes, it can survive. But if it moves into the place where their kink is a need and they are obsessing over it and they can't stop thinking about it, yes, the relationship can survive. My question is, can you survive in the relationship? And that's the question you need to ask yourself. And of course, the hope is yes, we all want you to survive in the relationship. But more than that, I want you to live authentically. I want you to be happy in and out of your relationship. So I want you to think, is this the right thing for me? If you decide staying in the relationship is more important than exploring your kink, I would highly recommend hiring a relationship coach to talk through your desires, to learn to sit with the disappointment of not having your needs met, and to create some coping mechanisms for it, because this is not something you can just bury for most people. And at the end of the day, every relationship is unique. A vanilla kinky match can have lifelong happiness and last forever. So yeah, I've given a lot of examples of what can and can't work, and these are just of the examples I know. There are thousands of people who are able to navigate the balance of one kinky and one vanilla partner, right? In the same way, people navigate someone who has a high sex drive versus a low sex drive. We find ways to make our relationships work. And I think the important thing is to continue to have the commitment to making the relationship work, whether that's introducing your kinks, not having your kinks. The communication and figuring out what works for you and your partner is the most important thing. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.